Hello, I'm Ed Rabyd, otherwise known as the Rabyd Atheist, a former pastor turned atheist, now a compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. You're free to like or dislike the video as you see fit, so feel free to hit those buttons. And I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel and hit your notification bells for more content is released. You're also free to comment below and share my videos as much as you like. I really classify myself as an educator pretty much most of my life, and so I'm always trying to let people know what I have learned. I'm certainly not perfect at it, but that's kind of why I let people share. And somebody asked me if I'm still thinking about monetizing the channel. I said, well, first of all, I have to get 1,000 subscribers, and I'm a long way from there. But even if I did, YouTube often has these rules that make it very difficult to actually make money with videos anymore, which is kind of sad because they still make money on their advertisements, but that's neither here nor there. This is part B of week 21's. I did a part A, which I'll link above my head, where I talk about, where I'm going to engage the comments. Part B, I kind of engage the more biblical comments. Today is a little bit more dealing with some other comments and moving right along. I want to start with a more humorous one from Jonathan Ganish. He was commenting on my last week's video on deconversion and learning to steel man. He made this comment. He says, a good argument is like sex. If it's tight, it feels right. Religion doesn't have good arguments or sex. I give Jonathan Ganish a lot of props and a lot of leeway with his comments because he was my very first subscriber, so I appreciate him very much. But yeah, you're right. Religion and sex for me it was always the guilt trip that kept you, I think, from good sex. I mean, if you were like a lot of couples that I knew that were Christian couples, I would say probably 75% of them actually had sex before they were married, and they felt guilty about it all the time. Now I would kind of look at that and say, well, what do you expect yourselves to do? And it's that guilt trip of you're not doing it right or you're everything else. And I appreciate that you could make that comment because I found that to be true. Religion has a tendency to limit sexual expression in a lot of ways, including sexuality, the whole homosexual issue, the trans issue. Discussions of sexuality become very limited when you have this absolute concrete notion of what you think sex and sexuality is. Freebird of Reason, man, you've been around for a bit, last few days, and you have a lot of comments, and I'll kind of deal with them as quick as I can. I don't know how long this video is going to be, but I'm going to try to hit everybody today. Very nice videos, truthful, sincere. I also lost my faith, but not before I was so depressed after trying to walk a pure life. I was on my knees crying out to God, but nothing happened. I'm now so much more years free and learned so much. Life is good, no more mind control that causes depression in certain people. I really do hope you're fully free and happy. There's a long road to recovery from religion, and I think that's why I'm still looking at all these videos. We are not alone now. But I know I was alone or felt alone during my deconversion. I wish I knew about YouTube when I was so low. Keep smiling. Your stories helped me a lot. Thank you. Good to hear it. Pete. Well, Pete, I'm glad you gave you at least part of your real name. Although I do like your title, Freebird of Reason. And I'm going to deal with this issue. This actually deals with some other comments today. One that came just today about, I'm going to give that comment because I think it's important because it hits this one too. Yes, Moonplug. Moonplug's a new commenter and a new subscriber like today. And, he said, your channel has helped me cope with my deconversion after 25 years of being a Christian. Thank you, both of you. I started this channel, and I'm going to be honest, I had a personal motivation with it, which was basically I was trying to work through my own deconversion issues. one of the great problems of being a pastor is it trained me to go through my ideology with my ministry, like with my preaching and my teaching. And when you're deconverting and you don't have those normal ways of processing your mental capacities, you kind of lose it. I try to do that with blogging. Writing has always helped me, and so I still do that a little bit. I've kind of shut down my blog indefinitely because I'm working on some other things, and I do want to get back to The Gray Wayfarer. It's one of my favorite blogs that I've ever written. But I kind of ended it because, it's very personal to me, and right now I need to focus on something that's equally important. But I still wanted this platform of YouTube to talk about deconversion for my own sake primarily. But I did have a secondary goal in hoping maybe somebody out there would find my videos and find them encouraging. Deconversion is a hard thing because you spend so much of your time thinking a certain way and doing things a certain way based on imaginary characters you have taken as real. And all of a sudden you realize they're not real. And all the things that kind of form a foundation. Religion has a tendency to be a very big foundation for people's lives. And trying to work through the deconversion issues are very, very difficult for me. Just so everybody knows, I have a secular counselor that I see every couple of weeks via internet. But I talk to her every 2 weeks or so. And probably half of our time is talking about deconversion issues because it's tough. It's tough going through all that stuff and not having a guide. And I agree. I think there's more of us. I think the internet, I think I've mentioned this before, but I think it's Daniel Dennett who mentioned the transparency of our society due to the internet is making it difficult to hold on to faith, because before a preacher in a small town could keep his whole congregation in his sway of what the truth was because there was no alternative story. Now, everybody in that small town can get on the internet and access the rest of the world and all the information in it. And along comes somebody that says, yeah, your preacher's full of crap because of this, this, and this. And, I don't know. It's just really one of those things that I hope I'm helping somebody too. I think there's an inherent part of me that likes to help other people. I'm just much more cautious about it now. I don't give of myself so much like I did when I was a pastor that I end up bankrupting myself. I know that there's some consequences to that. My counselor and I kind of concluded that that's the reason I had an affair was I was bankrupting myself emotionally, and I wasn't getting any emotional support from my wife at the time. And that's on me as much as her. And I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not blaming her either. I want to make that clear. It's reasons. I'm not sure it's a good excuse. There's really no good excuses, I suppose, for an affair other than you wanted to do it. That's the most honest excuse, or you felt you needed to do it. But those needs and those wants come from a reason. Things don't necessarily work out. And that's kind of, how I look at it. But that's all the other deconversion issues, like the fact that I am an atheist and my wife is still a pretty devout believer. I don't know. She's more than moderate, less than fundamentalist, I guess. But she still believes in Jesus. She still follows the faith that she was taught as a kid. And that's where a lot of people are. Suddenly becoming in a faith-mixed marriage is something that you have to talk through too. So these are deconversion issues, and I try to talk through them as best as I can. In my case, finding the bases for a lot of relationships and common ground are just gone. Also, I was kind of summarily kicked out of my church for the affair and a bunch of other things as well, and kind of treated harshly out the door after 9.5 years of service, where I really, I held people's hands. I did a lot of good things for people, and I cared about people. And I cared about my congregation right up to the end. Cared about those people, but you do something like what I did, and all of a sudden, it doesn't matter all the good things that you did for people. You just need to be thrown away, and I really did feel thrown away. And I had to work through that. That's a deconversion issue. And I'm still working through these things, and this channel will continue as long as I feel that It's helping me work through my deconversion, which may take the rest of my life, day by day. And if I'm helping others through their deconversion, bonus. I can live with that as a reason to keep the channel open too. So that's kind of what. See if Rabyd of Reason, Pete again. Looking good. Keep up the good work. Good to see your videos. I found this channel when looking through deconversion stories and found mine. That's a comment on my deconversion learning stealing. Opening salvo, which I introduced Monday. Nice chat. Enjoyed your thoughts. What you said about meeting people you knew as a Christian reminded me of my brother who is still baptized. Yeah, this is a deconversion issue too, is meeting people that knew you when. Often I have found that my basis for a lot of friendships before was my faith, and now it doesn't exist, and so those bases are kind of gone. I don't know. I try to be as free as possible now, and free in my mind, and that's the real challenge. Jonathan Ganish again. When people tell me they'll pray for me, I tell them I think I'll think for you, since they don't think. Jonathan, I love you, man. I love you, man. Also on opening salvo #1. Week 19, I talked about George Floyd, authority, and MLK. And this is where I think Pete's from the UK. In fact, I have a few UK subscribers, which I find very interesting. It's like people find my stuff in the early morning hours, and I'm still in bed. I agree. Sorry to hear about the death of another human, George, but what terrible behavior that followed. Here in the UK, injured people in protest doesn't do any good. I think thugs joined the fight for other reasons. I was hoping the UK would demonstrate peacefully. I was wrong. Throwing push bikes at police, women on horseback. I'm sure these people who fight don't really care about the others, but I'm sure the most peaceful people do. I would agree with that. You need to understand, this whole thing, though, has caused me to say, you know what I haven't really studied from a political science point of view? That is, I know some of the civil rights leaders, but some of the ones that I haven't really looked at, like Malcolm X, and a few of those I'm starting to take a look at, and I find that I agree with MLK on certain points and I agree with Malcolm X on certain points. So, but I think both of those men, even MLK was pretty, non-aggressive pacifist. Malcolm X is more of a libertarian in his sense of, you punch me in the nose, I'm going to punch you back. And that is a very libertarian, which is what I am. I'm very much an atheist libertarian, but, he's very much like that. So, that's kind of where I stand with that. Again, Pete, very interesting, great, and thoughtful content. I'm really enjoying the videos. That was on my Immoral Bible, episode 1, The Bible's Failure to Deal with Slavery and Why It Doesn't. I'm talking about the tall tale of Jesus. I get a lot of comments like this over the time about the content of the tall tale of Jesus, my Life of Christ series, from a skeptic's point of view. And I think this comment right here is good. It says, it's very interesting hearing from those different or out of tune of Scripture, being a former Christian who has read these things so much. It is good to hear a way of a comparison. Glad you are free from the mind shackles and helping to show these things. Religion is a powerful spell that most intelligent people can get pulled in. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and detail in the birth story. Have a great day and keep smiling. Well, thank you for that. I'm really trying to make this kind of a centerpiece of this channel, and the reason is, of course, I'm dealing as a compassionate anti-theist, mostly probably Christians, former Christians, or people who are Christian who come here and decide that, hey, Ed doesn't know what he's talking about. So when I'm doing the Life of Christ, the reason for that, the motive for that, is to show people my main tenet, and the reason why one of my criteria is the biblical criteria of 2 or 3 witnesses, is it became one of the death nails for the life of Jesus for me personally, because I'm like, literally, there's so little of the Gospels that actually has the same event written by 2 different sources that is even remotely different enough to say it came from 2 different witnesses. And this is particularly true in the beginning and end of the story, the birth narrative and the resurrection stories, which we'll see when I get there. Now, I do want to warn people about my Life of Christ series. Having taught Life of Christ as a Christian several times, it took me a year usually to cover it, and I was moving right along. And I am taking this far slower. This may take a year and a half and 2 years to get it done. So I hope you're ready to guys to buckle up. And I also want to do it well. That's why I'm taking so much time trying to learn some OBS stuff. Hopefully it'll make it a little bit better. What parts of the Bible would be impossible to be known? That's the thing about a lot of Jesus's life, is like the situation where the angel Gabriel appears to Mary. The only person that would have saw that is Mary herself. And that has no witnesses whatsoever. So Luke is recording something that only one person saw and claiming it as historical fact, and he's writing 30 years after the fact. This is the kind of thing pretty regularly, actually 60 years after the fact, this is the kind of thing really regularly that people consider proof that Jesus was real. This would not be accepted in historical work. It just wouldn't. And so, that's something that I struggle with at times because, when I was a Christian, I'm trying to keep people's faith going, and this is another deconversion issue. I'm going to title this one Deconversion Issue Comments. What is really hard is when you're trying to preach a message that you no longer believe in because it's your job. And it became my job. It wasn't fun anymore. It wasn't my calling, quote unquote. I'll get to that someday. My call into the ministry is a subject all its own for deconversion. But it becomes a drag because you're preaching some story from Jesus's life, like every Christmas and every Easter. These are the two major holidays of Christianity, and the biblical account of both those events is shaky at best from a historical point of view. In fact, most of it's garbage, and the rest of it that isn't complete garbage is really, really shaky. So yeah, there's a lot to be said for the fact that the biblical account just doesn't give a lot of witnesses to things, just one oftentimes. But, there's 4 Gospels. Yeah, except Luke's account of the birth narrative and Matthew's account are so divergent, they don't even cover the same events. So really you have one account of certain events and one account of other events, and neither time do they cross over. And that's a real problem. Okay, historically, that's a real problem. I always love people, well, the Gospels are historical. Yeah, except you're trying to verify the historicity of the Gospels, which means you have to go to outside sources to do that. And if you don't do that, you're being dishonest. If you have a document in ancient antiquity that relays a supposed historical account, then there needs to be collaboration. The reason why we believe Julius Caesar's account, we don't necessarily believe all of Julius Caesar's account of his invasion of the Gauls, but his contemporaries wrote about it. There's inscriptions of Julius Caesar on coins. There's tons more evidence for the existence of Julius Caesar than Jesus Christ. Just simply true. And yet, his account of his invasion of the Gauls lines up with some of history, and it gives us a good inside view into his mindset and his part. But we have other things that prove that he was part of the invasion of the Gauls. So that's what we have. We don't have that with Jesus. And that's the big problem. Lacey, commenting on yesterday's video, part A. This is the advantage of doing this in 2 parts. I can actually get some of this out. The Rabyd sure came out toward the last part, brother, and he's talking about Numbers 31. I want to make myself very clear about those kind of passages. I'm embarrassed that I used to try to justify God in some of that shit, and it pisses me off now. I used to wrestle with passages like that. How in the holy hell do I justify the fact that that God Almighty, the supposing loving, good, just creator of the universe, for purely arbitrary and capricious reasons, has just ordered the murder of entire families in front of little girls, and then those little girls are going to end up being sex slaves to their conquerors. And somehow God is good for ordering this. Yeah, I'm not seeing it anymore. And it embarrasses me that as a theologian and a biblical scholar, I used to try to justify this shit all the time. And so, yeah, I get a little bit upset about it because it's personal. You know, this is, once again, another deconversion issue. I want those of you that have deconverted to think of all the moral, ethical bullshit you had to convince yourself of to follow the Bible and to create the God of the Bible as a good guy. Holy shit, did we have to do some mental gymnastics for that? And, you know, I don't want to do that anymore, and I don't justify it anymore. And when somebody comes out at me with this kind of apologetics for this bullshit, I look them in the eye now and say, you know what? It's fine for us to handle the context. It's fine to talk about word origins. That's all very great. But you're justifying genocide and the sexual slavery of girls. Please explain to me how in any universe that's an ethical behavior, because I don't think it's ethical. And I'm telling you right now, because I don't think it's ethical and you're trying to justify God doing it, I as an atheist have better ethics than you as a Christian. Sorry, I do. And it really, really pisses me off. You know, that one. Thank you for responding to the EOG and Canaanite religions. As a preaching, I study and make a mental mess of it. To hear educated perceived size some look somehow justify shocking, keep rocking. Thank you. Yeah, you know, the Canaanite religions confuses a lot of people, but really what it is you had all these tribes that had their own god or gods, and they were all fighting with each other. And it wasn't just they that went to war; it was the gods that went to war. And Yahweh just seems to have come out on top. The Israelites and the tribe of Judah, along with the tribe of Benjamin and a few others, they just rose to the top. And the reason why we know Yahweh and not Baal is very simply that's what happened. They won. They won their wars, and so therefore they get to go in. Yesterday's video again, you know, very good point video, to the point video, excellent. I use these disgusting acts written in the Bible when I get to people thinking. I had 2 JWs knocking on my door when I use these stories. They're really uncomfortable. Oh, yes. Yeah, people who really believe the Bible and are witnessing to you and you bring this shit up, they get real uncomfortable in a quick hurry. Because they know that it makes God look bad, and they're going to have to justify genocide and sexual slavery and the slavery of little girls, you know, and things like that. You know, that's just not it. You're right. I mean, the rest of the comment is about which is more possible, more likely. Evolution allowed girls to get pregnant so young, or is it, is it God's perfect plan? It seems like God decides girls for pedophilia. I mean, the truth is we develop the ability to reproduce faster often than the wisdom to know how to handle it. This is why when I hear people talk abstinence-only sexual education, I want to puke. That's a great way to get a lot of pregnant teenage girls, if you ask me. And a more evolutionary response is, oh, shit, these kids start to think about sex when they're 10, 11, 12. I know I did. We probably should, educate them at that point and probably give them some ways not to get knocked up, and give them some options there. And that's an evolutionary atheist response. Whereas the Christian's response is, oh, no, they just need to not have sex. That's the moral and right thing to do. Well, I got news for you. Your biology is going to outweigh your theology really quick. We as humans make better moral laws than God about this, in my opinion. Agree with you there. I want to get back to Moonplug here. He made the remark about how this is helping him cope with 25 years of being a Christian. Thank you. You don't know how much that means to me. I've had to cope with not being a Christian for 3 or 4 years in the pulpit, realizing I wasn't a Christian, wasn't a believer. I tried deism for a while, tried a little paganism. settled on the reality. I just didn't believe in anything. I said, that none of this has any proof of its existence, so why do I believe it? And I think I was probably the last 2 years in the pulpit, I was a true atheist. And I was, I remember that time frame because I was buying a lot of atheist books. I was reading them, and I would tell people, I'm just studying this to find out what they really say. And in truth, I was just kind of arming myself and engaging the questions. And I didn't agree with all of them every time, but I learned a lot. And I suddenly realized that, I wasn't a Christian anymore, and I hadn't been a Christian for quite some time. I don't, people ask me about the deconversion. I mean, I know Moonplug here talks about COVID-19 was his deconversion moment, which means you've deconverted very recently, so you're kind of fragile in this, and I can appreciate your fragility at this point. If my videos help you get through this, I consider myself to have done the world some sort of service. I think I'm a compassionate anti-theist, which means I understand people that still have faith that are struggling with it. I don't get on their case. I don't go after them. I just try to produce my content and, help people understand this mythology stuff. Yeah, your Bible is mythology too. It's just as mythological as Thor and Odin, Zeus and Apollo. And when you finally get that across, it's really interesting how things happen. COVID is this whole COVID thing with religious churches saying we want to stay open regardless of the danger. We're going to trust in God. To me, that's kind of dumb, but I get you, because there were a lot of people calling this an act of God. And I'm like, I think that was this is how old this COVID thing is. I mean, I'm here in week 21, and I first talked about COVID being an act of God in week 10. So that was like 11 weeks ago, it's been about 3 months. And back then, my whole point was, because somebody made a comment that COVID was an act of God to get us to stop worshiping all this other stuff. My response to that is, if it's an act of God, it's a pretty lousy one. Number one, it doesn't kill everybody. It certainly doesn't, if it discriminately killed sinners, and went after people that were hypocrites about their faith, if it actually struck, all the TV preachers and a few other people dead and left everybody else alone, all the liars and thieves, I'd probably start believing in God again. But it doesn't do that. The most susceptible are people with pre-existing conditions and the elderly. Two people that would probably cry out to God, groups of people that would cry out to God more than anybody else. And a lot of older people are still people of faith, and I'm sure that a lot of people of faith died of COVID-19. So it's a really lousy wrath of God thing, if you ask me. And yeah, I can understand, Moonplug being having studied molecular biology, I understand the viruses work, and I just couldn't see God's hand in anything that's happening related to COVID. Yep, me too. You're dead on right. God didn't have nothing to do with it. COVID is a disease. It is a biological disease. Okay, it is a virus, and viruses are life forms. They, some people argue whether they're life in the traditional sense, but they attack all kinds of things, living things. I mean, there are tons of viruses that probably, just attack house cats. I don't know. But because we live in close proximity with a lot of animals, a lot of things, bounce around. And so when you start realizing that God couldn't be a part of this, yeah, it's a deconversion moment. I can get that for you. And my heart, my empathy goes out to you, because I've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, and, if my channel helps you get through these things, more power to you. Just keep walking, keep going. Don't give up. The hardest thing early on in deconversion is it's a lot like grieving, because you start to doubt your disbelief. Okay. And then the next thing is you get really angry. I often tell people that are newly formed atheists, don't say shit for the first year. You're too angry to really get that. I went through all my anger period while I was still a pastor. When I came out of that, I had different reasons to be angry, most of them personal. But I always tell people, when you first deconvert, spend a year working through that, because you're going to hit the stages of grief. The death of your faith is like the death of a person. It really is. It's not quite the same, but you go through a lot of the similar stages. You go through disbelief, you go through anger, you go through gradual acceptance of the lack of the presence of your faith, and then slowly but surely begin to learn how to get along without it. But it is a process because, once again, you've ordered your thinking to think a certain way according to a preset, determined thing of beliefs that are not your own. Learning to find out who you really are without the religion, holy crap. I'm still discovering stuff. So hang in there, and I appreciate the comment. I was beginning to wonder if this channel was doing anything, and lately I've gotten a couple of good subscribers that have really said, yeah, this has really done this in this last week, and thank you very much. I appreciate that. All right, once again, I want to thank everybody. I think that's it for the comments. Boy, I had a lot of them. I want to thank you for all the comments. I don't know, if I keep getting more and more comments, I'm going to have to condense them down and, paraphrase them more. But I do appreciate them. It lets me know that I'm on the mark, and that's what I want to do. And I think I've hit 25 subscribers, so I'm a quarter of the way to my goal for the first year. Unfortunately, I'm 21 weeks, and I only got, need to pick up some speed here, I guess. But thank you. Thank you all for your comments, and I appreciate them. As you can see, comments have a way of influencing Friday's videos, so feel free to go down, subscribe, like, comment, hit your notification bell, and do all the things you need to do to be a regular on the channel. One thing I don't tolerate, of course, is name calling in the comments. Ad hominem is a logical fallacy, so stay away from it. That's all I'm asking. Other logical fallacies just kind of come up, and I even make them from time to time, so I'm humble enough about it. If somebody points it out to me, thanks. In the meantime, hopefully someday I can make you a rabid atheist like myself. In the meantime, this is Rabyd the Rabid Atheist signing off and wishing you all a good day.